Welcome everyone to Textiles and Tea with the Handweavers Guild of America. I'm Kathy Group. I'm the Advertising and Marketing Manager for HGA, and I'll be your host today. Welcome everyone. For those of you who celebrated Christmas, hope you had a wonderful holiday. It's good to have you here this week. Today's sponsor of Textiles and Tea is Doreen Trudel in memory of Esther Dindell. And if you don't know about Esther Dindell, you should look her up. She was an amazing woman who was a great advocate of fiber arts. She traveled the world to learn more. She traveled across Liberia to learn about the different kind of weavings in that part of the world. If you get a chance, look her up. She's an amazing woman. So thank you, Doreen, for sponsoring today. We will take questions as always. It'll be the last 15 minutes of the hour. Please put your questions in the Q&A and not in the chat. Love your comments, put those in the chat, but I can't see the question if it's in there. Today we have Melanie Olde. Melanie's weaving practice is continually driven by curiosity and new learning. Her love of weaving started early, growing up on a goat farm. Her father was an engineer. Her mother was involved in industrial textiles. She went on to study jacquard weaving at the Fondazione Arte della Seta, Lisio, which is in Italy. And she completed her BA in textiles at the Australian National University in 2002. Her work explores new technology and old, with research interest in biometric and mathematical forms, and in interpreting these in three-dimensional loom-woven cloth, including embedded technology and new materials. She also has a keen interest in the history and development of complex woven structures in Asia. Melanie's professional weaving experience has been in business, research, teaching, and exhibiting nationally and internationally. Recently, she's been involved with Complex Weavers, winning the first place in Complexity 2020, and she's published articles in the Complex Weavers Journal. Welcome, Melanie. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Kathy. It's lovely to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Now, you live in Australia, right?
Yep, it's a bright, shiny morning here.
Well, thank you
for tea.
Traveling all this way to be with us. We love the international part of our show. This is great. But the very first question is, what is your favorite tea?
Thank you very much. I would just like to start by acknowledging the country where I'm on at the moment and Australia's First Nations people, particularly the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, whose land I'm speaking from today, and the Kamilaroi people, whose land I grew up on. as the traditional owners and custodians of the land and give respect to their elders past and present. So I've become a little bit fancier over the past couple of years with my tea drinking, and I'm currently drinking a matcha genmaicha, which is a Japanese green tea with roast rice.
Well, thanks for sharing that.
Become a little bit addicted to it.
I understand that. I can understand that. Well, thank you for acknowledging the original people of your country. That's very nice. We appreciate you doing that. So how did you get started in fibers?
Well, you gave me a little bit of a lead in there when you introduced me. So I grew up on an Angora goat farm, which was lovely. Goats are awesome. Oh, that's a interesting early picture. So my mother started selling spinning and weaving supplies in about the mid-80s. And so that's an early iteration of her shop. So I learnt to weave very early on. I think my first piece of weaving was when I was about 4. But eventually my mother couldn't find the yarns that she wanted. So she did what everyone does, and she purchased a line of spinning machinery from a mill down near Melbourne. And so that was a lot of fun growing up in amongst all of that machinery. It just gave me a really different perspective on the crossover between industry and hand weaving, and the benefits to both. And along that sort of period, we knew, we got to know quite a few people in the industry, but there was one in particular who was kind of a mentor. I mean, I was probably about 14 at that stage. And that other image that was up there was from some of the weaving journals that he gifted to me. And they really formed the basis of my learning. I'd sit down and I'd manually draft out all of the, manually plot out all of the drafts from it and replicate some of the fabrics. So I really got to know, what was a good system, I think, and that sort of set me up with a good grounding at that age. And then I went to Italy. I was a very, very timid, very naive 18-year-old heading off to Italy to learn jacquard weaving, which was incredible, absolutely incredible. And when I came back, I decided to go to uni to do my BA in visual art textiles. From there, after uni, I taught at a craft centre for about 8 years, but I was also doing production weaving and a little bit of exhibiting then. And just to continue that story, I think I got a little bit burnt out from that sort of high rate of production, plus the demands of the teaching and exhibiting. So I took myself back to Italy to do a bit of a recap. It grounded me again. Then I came back to Canberra and set up my studio here, and then decided to go back to uni during COVID. It was great. That's about where I am.
What an amazing journey, all the places that you went. And we're going to talk more about Italy. And if you can mention the place, because I know I butchered it badly. Could you talk a little bit about Italy and about the facility that you went to and why you chose that? That would be great.
Okay, I can't promise to do it much better on the, the pronunciation. It's the Fondazione, Arte della Seta, Lisio, in Florence. And I discovered that by going through I was going through old weavers magazines. And there was an article by Barbara Setsu Pickett on velvet weaving in Florence. Right. And so this was mid 90s. And it was 96 when I went there first. And so I wrote to them without really expecting anything back. And they wrote back with a course catalogue, and yes, I would like to go. So it's an amazing centre. If anyone has the opportunity to go there, it's life-changing, I think. The facilities there, they have mechanical and digital jacquard. And there's something I really love about the mechanical jacquard as well. They both have their benefits and they're both a little bit different. But there is something quite beautiful about going through that process. From the design, well, the first 2 weeks of the course I did, I think it's set up a little bit differently now, was a really intense 2 weeks of fabric analysis. So you had this intense grounding where you sit there with a little eyeglass and a little pick, and you're counting tiny threads and looking at structures, and that definitely set me up for loving structures, and I still do that quite a bit today. And from there you go into the design, and when I was there initially, we were still using point paper, so you'd be manually plotting the design out. And then you sit there on a punch card machine and you punch the cards, and then you lace the cards, and then you learn the mechanism of the jacquard. When I went there the second time, part of that process was computerized, which was fantastic to learn as well. So it was interesting to see that transition phase, and to learn the benefits of both methods, because they are still a little bit different. They also do a lot of production weaving there too. They produce some incredible fabrics, just incredible. And the two weaving teachers there, Eva Basile and Julie Hollyoak, was there when I went last. Ava is still teaching there. And I believe they do a fantastic online course there in fabric analysis now too. Check out their website, it's brilliant.
Well, I did, when I saw that in your bio, I looked it up and I just fell in love. I'm like, packing my bags, heading out. It's just gorgeous. Amazing. And it looks like, and I don't know if this is new, but it looks like they do like real short-term courses as well as extensive training, like you took, some really intense training.
I think I was there for, I think the first one was 6 weeks.
Wow. Yeah.
But they do change their courses from time to time, so they sort of learn different things at different times. And
it looked amazing. It just looked absolutely amazing.
I'd recommend it.
Okay. Sign me up. Yeah, your work, I love your work. It has a real organic feel to it. It seems like it's alive, that it moves and breathes. Was this your goal when you were designing, or as you design?
I'm really chuffed to hear you say that, actually, because I have been working on that kind of idea for a little while, and it's sort of, I think it's, for me mentally, it's only really solidified in the last year or two. So it's great to hear you say that. It's like, it's already coming through. But I guess for a long time I've been really looking at plant cell structures. And the interesting thing about them, I find, is there's sort of like an overall sort of average geometry, but it's never going to be perfect. It's always a little bit wonky, a little bit not quite this way. I mean, some of the cells are sort of, they've got 6 sides, so kind of hexagonal, but you know, it's not quite, they're all just sort of settling into each other based on what's around them. So they sort of grow this way and that way. And I see a lot of similarity to that in weaving. If you look at it like a unit cell, like a block in weaving, that you can sort of translate that a little bit to, though, with thinking about those cells. It's like it's sort of a way of translating, like an analogy. That the growth of one is dependent on the other. You can nudge one a little bit in a different way and see how it affects the next unit cell. And I'm always interested in sort of creating a link between the structure and the organic kind of feel. So I think that's, yeah. And it creating a sort of a protective structure within that cell. And I guess I'm starting to expand that a little bit more practically, looking at using that protection for embedded technology, like pneumatics and robotics and fun things like that.
One thing about your work is that, to me, weaving is usually viewed as flat, two-dimensional, right? It's an inch this way, however many inches that way, kind of thing. And that you have aggressively challenged that view, and that you produce beautiful three-dimensional work as seen in these images. Would you talk about taking on that kind of a challenge, or that making that decision?
Sure. I love that idea of the aggressively challenging. It's sort of, it really came about gradually, I think, rather than a sort of a defined decision. I think I always thought that because you have control over all of these threads in a cloth, and you can make them do whatever you want within the sort of confines of your loom. But being able to control them means that you're not confined to one plane. And I think that's the tricky thing, the 2D, 3D kind of definitions. It's sort of, I tend to think more in planes. So you've got your sort of Cartesian plane, and you've got that 2D surface, 2D plane, just sort of flat like that, like you'd think about on a loom. But when you realize that you can think about it in a plane going this way, and there's the plane going lengthways that you can design for, rather than just that looking down on the surface. And when that's the thing, I'm certainly not against the single plane, and I still use it quite a lot. But it was this curiosity that I can get a fabric to burst out of that plane. I can get shapes happening this way and this way, as well as on that surface. And I sort of, I think of weaving as a construction method. So you can make, just going back, you can make it do whatever you like. I think one of the things that comes through a lot when you're working in those different dimensions is realizing the strength of weaving, because you've got those threads going in those different directions, but they're continual. Other construction methods, it's usually sort of stuck together almost, whereas weaving's got this integration. So the threads are giving a huge amount of strength in those directions, but with a flexibility as well. And when you play about with different geometric shapes along those sorts of lines, surprising things happen. You might get a stretch in a different way, or you might get a robustness. One of the structures I've got here is that this is a 3D fabric using paper, and it's very different properties depending on the material, but it's like a, you know, it's not going anywhere that way or that way, but then you've got this kind of, it forms these beautiful curves.
And that's like paper?
It's paper.
Wow.
It's it's from Scandinavia. So it creates an additional way of thinking. It's really fun.
It sounds fun. Well, you know, it's interesting because you don't just weave, you do research, right? So
I do.
Can you talk about what you're researching, and then how is that part of your weaving?
Okay. I'm usually researching a few things at the same time, like I think most people. So you mentioned that I was looking at a lot of complex structures in Asia, particularly China and Japan, and that history, and the technology development, I think, is something that really interests me. And so that's sort of going on in the background. That keeps my sort of, yeah, it's like a sort of sideline exactly, but it's sort of, it's something to dive into quite a bit. But going back and doing my master's was a really, it was a very directed, pointed decision. I had a lot of the ideas that I wanted to explore, but using resources at a uni is different. I knew I wanted to do a lot of research in 3D weaving, and I wanted to look at industrial applications as well as artistic and design applications. I wanted a different perspective on my work. And one of the things that I really wanted was the sort of interdisciplinary relationships. Like you've heard of STEM and STEAM. So it's putting the art into the science and technology areas. So I've been talking with applied mathematician and materials engineering people, and it just all feeds in, but it's sort of helping me to get a really good grasp on what I'm interested in researching more. And it's sort of, it is that movement and the energy within a cloth that you're able to imbue it with. And looking at the sort of systems, I mean, weaving is a system in itself, which is fantastic, but sort of really getting to explore those systems and what you can add to them. So there's there's the conceptual side involving the energy and the movement in a cloth. And then there's the cool bits, like the just creating really unusual, fun fabrics without the need to justify it for anything.
Well, speaking of the cool cloth, you use a variety of fibers in your work. In this work, the one that's coming up, you use silk and metallic printed washing paper, which I have no idea what that is. So I hope you'll explain a little bit more about that. So what are the challenges of using unusual fibers? Now, the one on the left is the washing paper, right?
Yes, it is.
With the green? Okay.
So washi paper is it's a Japanese paper. And it's made
okay. I get it. All right, sorry.
That's all right. It's made by using plant fibers rather than just the wood pulp. So it's a lot stronger and it's a lot more malleable. So it's quite soft to use. And I coated that paper with copper foil and then used kind of a transfer printing to put an image onto it. And that technique is quite an old Japanese technique as well, like centuries old. So that's come from my study and research into those historic techniques. I also, because of that study, I took myself off to Japan and did a little course there as well, using gold washi paper, which was just to die for. So if you get a chance, go try that too. So my philosophy with using different materials is, well, for a start, I love different materials. I love contrasting materials. I love what new things can do. I love discovering their properties. But I kind of feel like if you're working with different materials, it's a bit of give and take. You need to work with how the material behaves. I mean, obviously you want to achieve a certain effect with them, but you also need to allow yourself some movement for what it wants to do. So you're working with it rather than trying to completely control it. If you try and control it, sometimes you can lose some of the characteristics. Like the pink piece that was shown earlier, I could have woven that a lot closer and, everything would be perfectly lined up. But because that was monofilament, so like sort of softer fishing line and silk and stainless steel, I really wanted to sort of show how they interact together, which is quite slippery. But I'm quite happy with that, just letting it do what it wants to do. So it's a lot of sampling and it's a lot of readjusting your thinking for each material. And I haven't found a material yet I don't like working with. So it's just a new thing to get to know. It's always fun.
You seem like one of those artists that loves the process as much, if not more, than the product. Because I mean, you're always talking about, well, I'm learning about this and I'm trying that. And is that true?
I think in this phase of my career, I'm just letting myself go with that. I think because I did production work for so long and it was all about the finished product and, more about the market and that kind of thing, I've given myself the last couple of years to just let loose a little bit and enjoy enjoy the process, enjoy finding stuff out. And it's kind of interesting because I do get the odd nudge from my supervisors at uni saying, do you think it'd be nice to see that as a finished product? It's like, well, I haven't decided yet. So I'm doing a lot of proof of concept. But I think it's nice to give yourself that freedom and opportunity, because then a finished product, you're more confident with, and that you're expressing what you want to, what you want people to see, hopefully. Yeah, I think I'm quite content, but I do like to finish things occasionally.
I don't know. I think finishing is highly overrated sometimes.
Well, I think that's the thing too. It's like, is something ever really finished, or is it just a part of the process?
Yeah, there you go. Well, one thing I love about your work is that it has such intense characteristics. You use beautiful, intense colors. You have bold, distinct patterns, and then you add in the 3D. How do you balance that? I mean, I just feel like if I tried that, I'd just end up with a hot mess. So how do you balance that?
Well, there's also the thing of I generally only let the things that work out into the world.
So there are some hot messes in your closets, right?
There's a few.
Yeah, okay.
But they're learning experiences rather than hot messes.
Okay.
But it is tricky. And in thinking about that, I guess it's a good reflection to know to stop and think about how I work more. I think I always start with the purpose and the function first, whether that is meant to be a functional piece or more of an art-based piece. I've generally got an idea first about that, and then just because the way my brain works, I think then it's the structure. It's like, which structure, what do I want it to do, and what structures can I play with to achieve that, and what structure is relevant to the concept that I'm looking at or the idea.
So when you're doing this, do you find that you kind of draw out an idea first? Do you sketch it out ahead of time? Do you do it on computer?
It's a little bit mixed.
Is it?
I'm not particularly set to one particular format. A lot of the time it's sort of going round and round in my head. And then I'll sort of probably have a poke with a pencil, just kind of sketch a little bit out. Then sometimes it is easier to go onto the computer and do some line work there and some CAD work, and then maybe poke at a draft a little bit, maybe do a little bit of sampling, and then sort of repeat that process to refine it. But adding color into it as well, it's its own little kettle of fish. It's always a little bit, I mean, you can have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen, but when you start weaving, then you get a really strong idea of what that color's doing with that structure. One of the things I'm working on at the moment, I think it was my last Instagram post. I'm looking at incorporating some color of hand-dyed monofilament, so it's clear. So with the structures I'm looking at, they're multi-layered, so it's building up saturation points within the fabric. So if it was a single fabric, it'd be very subtle and just, it'd depend a lot on the background as to how much you saw. But because of that multi-layering, you get this sort of impact of color in one section. And that's just as much about the structure as it is about the color. So it's sort of, there's always a new surprise to play with. And there's a little bit of hope involved in it as well. It's like, I think it's going to work like this, but you know, so that balance is quite tricky. But if you keep to a kind of a composition, a basic idea of the composition, then it takes a little bit of the risk away. So yeah.
So who's influenced you? It sounds like you influence other people, as I can tell from the comments we're getting in the questions.
Oh.
Who was the artist that influenced your work?
I think the earliest and the longest is Anne Sutton. Her book Ideas in Weaving, along with those weaving journals that I mentioned, her book Ideas in Weaving was really what taught me to weave. But that book really, it encourages you to challenge every aspect of.
Now, who is this again?
Anne Sutton.
Anne Sutton. Oh, okay. Okay.
She's British.
Right.
And when you realize how much of the cloth and the loom you can challenge and alter and question, then it's like this sort of world sort of explodes a little bit. It's like, I don't have to do that. There's no can't, there's no, it won't do that. It's like, well, what can I, if I do this? It's like, and I know a lot of people are a little bit loath to alter their loom a little bit, but sometimes it works out. I do have a few nail holes and a few modifications and bits and pieces on my loom. I've got, there's a few things I'd like to check it up with. But that's a really huge influence on my weaving. On the sort of philosophy side, I guess, there's a Japanese artist, Junichi Arai, who wrote a fabulous introduction to that same book. But he, from the way I read it, I felt a responsibility as a weaver to really create things now, like for the sort of now. I love historical weaving and I love looking at how weavers thought before, but I'm always really conscious that we're in the present at the moment, and we have so many opportunities to take advantage of that. Why not see what they can do? It's so exciting. It's a really exciting time at the moment to be in that crossover between art and technology and craftsmanship, really strong craftsmanship and innovation. It's a really exciting place to be. Hand weavers have the flexibility to do a lot of things that industrial weaving can't. So really push that as much as you can. That's my philosophy. But I'm also, other artists, I guess. There's painters like Rothko and his sublime kind of immersive color, and Gerhard Richter and Sol LeWitt. Sol LeWitt, I think, is a fantastic weaver's artist. He wrote, he did a lot of, he's a minimalist from sort of 60s. And he did a lot of these procedural artworks, which is like, as soon as you read a little bit about them, it's like, that's weaving.
There you go.
So yeah, and I'm looking at things, contemporary things like generative art and programming, that kind of thing. It's all, there's no boundaries anymore. There's no I really don't like being put in a box. It's like, oh, you this kind of, or this. There's so many boundaries being blurred at the moment. It's fantastic.
Well, if you could reinvent your career, whether would you do instead of weaving, or would you somehow change your weaving and artwork to do something differently? What would you change?
That's a tricky one. I think I really love the natural world. And so I think it'd be along the lines of, if it was completely different, I think it'd be along the lines of probably biology or ecology. Probably ecology, because I love those systems and how different things work and influence each other. Yeah, how would I weave differently? I'm not quite sure. Kind
of like if you knew then what you know now, would you do anything different?
I'd probably try and do a little bit more industrially, just to get a chance to play with machines. They look pretty fun. Yeah, I think, yeah, and I'd be bolder. I think I spent a little bit too much time a little bit worried about the world. But I also think that might be just an age thing.
Yeah. Isn't that true? Yeah. True. If we knew that. Yeah.
I've learned a lot. So yeah.
Yeah. So what's next for you?
Maybe finishing some finished work. Yeah,
now, are you still in school now?
I'm about halfway through my master's at the moment. I'm doing it very, very slowly.
As one should,
Gives me time to think. And I think contemplating further study to see what opportunities that will bring. And I'd like to work a lot more with those interdisciplinary areas. I think there's a lot to give back to the world. I think there's some interesting industrial applications for this kind of weaving, but coming at it from an art and crafts basis, there's a different way of thinking that could help find solutions for things. I think that's one of my kind of core wants and needs, is that I want to contribute something, and through weaving. But there's, you never quite know what's around the corner.
I know.
But I would like to do more study. I don't think I'll ever really stop. But hopefully a bit more exhibiting.
Yeah. That'd be nice. That would be nice.
I know, right?
Well, we have a bunch of questions. Shall we go to those?
Oh, okay.
People asking questions. What is the website of the school in Florence?
I think
put up the name. Is that on your website also?
I think it is.
Okay.
It'll be somewhere in my CV.
Okay.
It's Fondazione Lisio, I think.
Oh, somebody put it up.
Thank you.
Joshua. Thank you, Joshua. We appreciate that. What is the name of your early mentor when you were a teenager? With the beginning of the program, you were talking about that.
He was from the industry, the Australian textile industry.
Okay.
His name was Jim McGregor.
Okay.
And I think if you were in the textile industry in the 80s in Australia, you probably would have known.
Okay.
But he was sort of, fascinating person.
Could you tell us how weaving was in Kyoto, Japan? Is that where you went? Hi, Beth French. Is that where you were?
Yeah. I traveled around a little bit. It was only a short course.
Mm-hmm.
It was at the Koho traditional Japanese weaving. They're not specifically a school, but they do courses.
Okay.
They do, I know some of the production weaving they do is for the imperial family.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of like, it felt like the kind of equivalent to Lisio, sort of like in the sort of the glam factor and the beautiful sumptuous fabrics and it's gorgeous. But that the structures there, I was looking at, a lot of people know Japanese weaving as the like the beautiful kasuri and those kinds of structures. But I really wanted to get to grips with the compound weaves, like the lampas and the very complex figured weaves there, because they've been doing those sorts of structures for hundreds and hundreds of years. So it was interesting to compare the European perspective with the Asian perspective. And there were some surprising things. I even just doing fabric analysis, they use a lot of 2-1 twills. And I've been so sort of set and always doing, 4-end twills or 8-end twills or, those sorts of things, like 3. But of course that makes a lot of sense if you're using, and that the green piece that I did with the washi paper, if you're using a 3-end twill for the ground and a 3-end twill for the binder, then you've got 2 extra shafts for the selvage. So it's complete, it's fantastic. It worked out perfectly. But yes, there's some beautiful, beautiful fabrics if you take a little dive into those structures.
Beth French wants to know, if you work on a dobby, what is your favorite loom?
Oh, that's well, I do love my my AVL CompuDobby. I've worked on that for over 10 years. What year is it now? Yeah, over 10 years. Triple back beam, always got to have more back beams.
How many back beams?
3.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Good fun.
I bet.
Even then I've occasionally got something hanging off the back as well. So, mod your loom. But I've also, at uni, they have the ARM looms. So it's a much smaller loom. And they're super fun. They're they feel a lot different, more different. My AVL is set up to be a production loom. So it's sort of, it has that kind of functionality. But there is something different about the ARM as well. So I think I don't want to play favorites.
It's like your kids. You don't want to say which child you like the best. They all have
Everyone
their
is their own special someone.
yes. Rita Syrians wants to know the name of the Japanese paper.
Washi. It's WASHI.
Okay.
And there's lots of different sorts of washi paper. So if anyone wants to have a play, I would recommend just getting a few different ones. There's some great places online you can purchase it from.
Okay.
But yeah, have fun with it. I'd recommend a steel ruler and one of those rolly cutters if you're going to be doing lots of tiny strips of paper. Yeah,
because it's very thin, isn't it?
Yeah,
almost translucent. Or it can be.
Yeah, but it's really strong within that, because I mean I've tried other types of paper, like rice paper. Rice paper breaks. Well, the rice paper I use broke really easily and was not suitable at all, but it was good to have a comparison. But yeah, go for it, have fun.
Randy Rewalt said, just to thank you for saying, is it finished or is it part of the process? It's a lovely and thoughtful idea. Yay, Randy, I agree. Diane Fields, I hope I can get this question correct, said, you mentioned striving to achieve and appreciate the energy in the design. In addition to aesthetic energy, have you thought your structures actually do generate energy, such as electricity? Have you done anything like that?
That's a really interesting field right now. And you can take that in a couple of ways. If you wanted to take it conceptually, you could dive into that kind of what is it doing for the viewer, and that kind of sort of meta kind of energy. But if you wanted to dive into some industry research, there is some very cool stuff happening in energy harvesting, and particularly using different woven structures. And again, that's another sort of tier for weaving, because of the way the threads are moving through the fabric, and depending on what kind of coatings you have on them, like particularly actually that this kind of structure, it's called a angle interlock structure. That friction can create different sort of things, but it can create a kind of a static just from the way it rubs. And I'll try not to go too far down the rabbit hole, but it's really interesting. The more points you have, the more binding points you have in a fabric, creates the more friction. And I'm not an expert in this, but from some of the reading and research I've been doing, the more binding points you have, the more friction, the more energy you can harvest. If you have the right kind of coatings on threads, and that's a whole different amazing rabbit hole, and you've got the technology hooked up at the end of it, it's quite a recent, like last 5 years kind of industry research field, and it's definitely something I'm interested in, to sort of, it's the fantastic structure that weaving can be. I mean, it's been around for so long, like, and it's still got more to give.
Oh my gosh, we could talk about that forever.
It's super fun.
Oh wow. Dan, do you teach? Somebody wants, Karen LeBlanc wants to know, do you teach?
I do.
Are you mostly in Australia, or?
Yeah. But I'm not sort of confined to that. I think like a lot of people, I've thought about doing online courses for a while. But when we can travel a little bit more, but I haven't taught as much in the last couple of years, just because of I'm taking that time to sort of just play with some ideas. But I will be teaching a course coming up this year. But yeah, I enjoy teaching. I enjoy there's a little bit of my philosophy on teaching. It's less about the teaching being taught at, and more about the mentory kind of finding out. I mean, you can have a broad topic, but finding out what the individual wants to get from a course. I think that's where I get a lot of fun out of. It's like, okay, how can we do this?
Again, process versus product. You're a process kind of guy.
I'm learning a lot about myself through this interview. Thank you.
Well, this is from Barbara Setsu Pickett. Hey, Barbara. She's been watching.
Wow.
Yes. I think she's going to do a plug here. Do you know about the upcoming 12th Congress of Symmetry, Art and Science will be held in Porto, Portugal from July 11th to the 16th. Deadline for abstracts is December 31st. Jump on that, girl.
I did not know that.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara.
That's perfect for you. What a combination. Art and
could you say that title again for me?
Yes. Congress of Symmetry, Art and Science. And it's going to be in Portugal. You need an assistant, let me know. Love to go. Oh, wait a minute. That's during Convergence. I can't go. But anyway.
No.
Well, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you very much.
Well, we have more questions, but I think we're going to have to stop for today. You have been wonderful. I love hearing your theories, and I could look at your work forever. It's just amazing, and it boggles my little pea brain of what you do.
It's easier than you think.
Is it? I don't know. I think it's amazing. Thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you want to see more of Melanie's work, go to her website, which is melanieolde.com. But Melanie, you probably do more on Instagram, or as much.
Yes.
Yeah, you're more of an Instagram kind of gal. And so that's Melanie at Melanie_Olde, right?
Yep.
With an E.
And I love my Instagram community. I've met some amazing people there. I encourage anyone to join in the weaving community on Instagram. Great bunch of people.
Well, I have to go back and look at your account again because I want to see what you mentioned earlier. You said you just posted something new. So now I got to go back and look at it. So check out her and her website. You can see more of her work and more about her. And hopefully we'll see you in the US sometime soon in teaching. We'd love to have you here.
I'd love to.
Thank you again to Doreen for sponsoring Textiles and Tea today and honoring a wonderful artist, Esther Dendau. She is the namesake of the HGA scholarship, the Dendau Scholarship, that is really geared toward new and upcoming young weavers. And so we thank you so much for bringing her up again and reminding us what a wonderful woman she was. And again, you got some downtime this week. Let's do a little surfing on the internet. Go check her out, as well as Melanie. But she has done some amazing things. And we're excited to have a scholarship in her name associated with HGA. We also want to thank if you would like to sponsor Textiles and Tea or your guild or your business, please go to the website weavespindye.org and you can learn more about becoming a sponsor. A lot of our sponsorship also comes through the Fiber Trust. If you would like to join, if you like to support HG either by joining or donating to the Fiber Trust, please do so by going to, again, weavespindye.org. You can see here on this screen that this is where we are for donations for the year. We're really trying to go over that hill right now. We got another, less than a week. If you want to donate, and we want to thank you all for donating. You've been very generous this year, because for a lot of people don't understand is that a lot of the programs that we love, the Textiles and Tea, our magazine, Shuttle, Spindle, and Die Pot, the Certificate of Excellence, those are not covered completely by the fee that people pay or your membership fees. That your donations to the Fiber Trust help us make those programs go. They also support our grants and scholarships. It supports our interns who come to Convergence, who we love so much. So Convergence is our source of income for 2 years. And with it being canceled or postponed last 2 years ago, we have really been running in the red. And so we are excited that people have been jumping in there trying to help keep HGA afloat and going. And we can do that through your donations. We've had a good fundraising goals, and we're really striving to meet this next goal. Now, there were some questions again about the charity. There's a part of economic recovery opportunities you can see here on the screen called CARES, and it allows you to do $300 charitable deduction for all taxpayers, even if you don't itemize, and it's $600 if you file jointly. So again, we appreciate all of you who've donated already. If you're thinking about how do you want to donate before the end of the year, please consider Handweavers Guild of America. You can donate on our website, or you can call us at 678-730-0010. Excuse me. Gets me choked up. Again, Melanie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to wish everybody a happy new year this week. And next week we have Sarah Haskell to start off our new year. So y'all have a wonderful week and happy tea.
Thank you.